Welcome to CSEC Biology, the cover page. I am Mr. Wilson, and today we're looking at the CSEC July 2020 Biology Paper 1. We're going to be doing a review of the paper, pretty much an overview of the paper, and of course we're going to be going from question number 1 through to 60. If you have not yet liked, share, or subscribe, it might just be time for you to do so now. And when you do, remember to hit that notification bell and select all so you'll be notified as soon as there is a new publication. Now, if you have not yet, be reminded of our online classes on a Wednesday, Friday, and of course Sunday at 5:05 p.m. and we're streaming from Kingston, Jamaica. You want to be a part of that class. Come locked, loaded, and of course be prepared to learn. Carry however many friends you want to, and of course it doesn't matter where you're from or who is your teacher with school, island, Caribbean, religious, or creed. Just be there on time and be ready to learn. Let's hop on into the question. Item number 1. Which of the following feature is used to classify a group of organisms as, of course, class insect? Now, the A here being size, B looking at shape and color. The most suitable answer here, of course, is going to be legs. Insects, they usually have a body that is divided in 3: head, thorax, abdomen, and of course they usually have 3 pairs of legs. So 3 pairs of legs. D here for number 1 being the best answer. For question number 2, which of the following sampling method is most suitable for estimating the population of mushroom, I think, in a garden? Of course, that is of course going to be very easy. The quadrat is here as the most suitable, as a quadrat is used to sample organism, where it's estimating the density of the mushroom in a garden. The quadrat is of course used to sample stationary or slow-moving organisms, while the line transect and the bell transect looks at changes over a particular domain. The mark and release is of course going to be looking at, of course, animals that are a little more motile. But these are all interesting sampling methods that you really want to ensure that you are aware how to use these methods, so that when you see them as you move further in science, you'll be able to, of course, master them. So like I said earlier, A is the answer for question number 2. We move on down to question number 3. Living organisms such as plants are affected by abiotic factors. And the abiotic factors here refers to the non-living component or the physical component of the environment. And that could include sunlight availability, topography, soil, pH, mineral, that type of thing. So the abiotic factors which determine where they become established. Now, which of the following lists some of these determining factors? So A here being parasitism, commensalism, mutualism. That in itself is going to be, of course, a biotic factors, because we're looking at living. And of course, you'll realize here that we really want to solve for abiotic factors. So, of course, A could not be the answer. B is more suitable. We're looking at a pH, mineral, and of course, availability of sunlight. Now, C there, the predator there in C would make it no, not possible. And D is, of course, something a little different. So the most suitable answer there is going to be B. And we move on down to the other question, which of the following statement about recycling manufactured material is true? So less energy is used in manufacturing of new products by using the raw materials, of course, recycled product. So 2 there from recycled product, 2 there being some manufactured product can be recycled. We're not going to be recycling things like asbestos. It is too carcinogenic, so that definitely is not recycled. and recycling of some non-biodegradable material prevent landfill being filled up very quickly. So that is of course true. We want to of course ensure that we reduce, we reuse, and of course we recycle. So our answer here of course is going to be all. We think that all is pretty much applicable here. So D being the answer here. So we'll move on down to question number 5, which looks at a repeat aquatic food web. It is a food web, and it says item 5 refers to the following diagram of a food web. And there we have some aquatic organism and quite a number of organisms there. Let us look at what is required of us. We are looking at, of course, underlined there, the phytoplankton and zooplankton. As it wants us to look at trophic level 1, we want to find out what trophic level 1 pretty much represent. So trophic level 1 is represented by, of course, the plant, usually the producer. And here the phytoplankton is going to be the producer. Zooplankton is, of course, a microscopic animal, while the phytoplankton is a microscopic plant. So the most suitable answer here is going to be C, the phytoplankton being the answer there. Move on to question 6. A farmer noticed pink mealybugs in his garden. He is advised to introduce the ladybird beetle, a pretty little beetle it is, to, of course, control the mealybug. This type of relationship between the mealybug and the ladybird beetle is pretty much described as a predatory relationship. And predatory relationship, as the ladybird is going to be eating the mealybug, and that's an example of biological control, as it were, with the Brazilian cane toad that was brought into Brazil to control sugarcane beetle, and in Jamaica the mongoose was brought in to control snake in the cane field. So of course, biological control are usually very useful. Predator-prey relationship here, B is the answer for 6, where the predator is of course going to be the ladybird beetle and the mealybug being the prey. We're moving on to question 7, and it shows pretty much a food chain, and it is looking, I did do some work on this. I've been having some problem with the system, so I've been doing some work and voicing over. We have the phytoplankton there being the producer, and of course it is saying, yeah, the bus there. As we move along the food chain, a whole lot of things happen. The organism which receive most and least energy respectively in the food chain. Okay, let me just explain that. The producer is usually receiving most of the energy, and it comes pretty much from the sun. However, as you move across the food chain, we are losing energy to excretion and respiration. About 10% of the energy is being lost to a successive trophic level. So the boss there is going to be receiving least energy, and of course, most is going to be the phytoplankton. So the B there is going to be our answer. So answer there B. Item 8 refers to, of course, this diagram showing the flow of energy pretty much in an ecosystem. Heat there loss for producer, consumer, and decomposer. So it wants us the energy flow is not 100% efficient. And of course, this is because if we omitted A, we omitted B and C, and of course D, we chose D to be the answer. Lost energy is of course lost through respiration and excretion, as we explained earlier. So of course D there being the answer. The greatest threat to the survival of coral reef, not A, not B, not C. We chose D for the answer here. Increase ocean temperature. As the temperature increases, it will cause coral bleaching. So that relationship between the zooxanthellae and the coral, that will be broken. And of course, there will be no lack of food. And what is going to happen is that there is going to, of course, going to be organism perishing. And of course, coral reaching the coral dying and all of that. So, of course, the coral will, of course, after some time cease to exist. So the biggest threat here is going to be the increase of temperature in the ocean water. You would have also appreciate that as the temperature increases, so too the oxygen will decrease, availability of oxygen in the water. Which of the following are effects of pollutants on coral reefs in the Caribbean. We're definitely going to be having less fish in this area as there will be no area for spawning. Food won't be ideally available and that type of thing. So they are going to be moving on to environment that is pretty much more habitable for them. I don't know about more branch on coral. We know about increased microbial and seagrass growth as there be more nutrient in the water. So I selected there 1 and 3 being B being the answer for question 10. But we know as we continue to introduce pollutant to this area, it is going to cost, of course, more nutrient. Now, item 11 refers to the following diagram of human population size over a period of time. Uh, let's look at this. I did some work with this. Which of the following factor most likely accounts for the change in population size? We're not able to see that size from where to where. We're not too sure population size from. We know that it ends at pretty much 1989 as I circled there. But of course, where it started from, I am not too certain. But I'm going to be assuming that it probably started right before 1971, somewhere there. So if my assumption is correct, then I am going to be assuming and of course trying to answer the question. And if you have a copy of the paper and you can of course look from where it is coming to 1989, because I am not able to see it on my paper, as I said in the start of the video, that we have a paper that is not so much the best of paper, but we're looking at pretty much where it is coming from. And like I said, we are assuming that it is coming from our left here and going pretty much to 1989. So we could probably uh, look, I am sort of wondering where to go with this. Sort of wondering, but I'm going to try something. I'm going to start here. All right, so I assume that it starts there and it stops here. All right, so now I'm thinking that let us look at the options. Increase in contraceptive use, epidemic, increase in contraceptive use. So if you are going to increase contraceptive use, then the population will fall. Then decrease in fatal crime, the population will rise. Right? So contraceptive use fall, fatal crime reduce, population increase, and of course, epidemic or deadly disease, then you are seeing now the population falling again, zoop. So I think pretty much 1, 2, and 3, D being the answer for question 11, is responsible for the shape of the graph that we are seeing there. If you have the paper, make sure that you look at it. I am not too so sure what was there. This was just an assumption as to what it could have been. So we look at question number 12. When compared to a cheek cell, a muscle cell contains, this is going to be mitochondria. Like the liver cell, the muscle cell is going to contain more mitochondria. The vacuole is pretty much going to be the same, except for the size in plant and animals. But this is looking at a cheek cell, so we don't need to go any further. C being the answer there. I will move on over to question number 13. Which of the following organelle is directly involved in photosynthesis? That is always going to be your chloroplast, which contains the chlorophyll. Now, the nucleus is, of course, responsible for the genetic information and controlling what happens in the cell. The cytoplasm is where the organelles are suspended. And, of course, the mitochondria is, of course, going to be providing that energy that the cell requires. So C there is our answer for 13, as, of course, we make our way to question number 14, which, of course, refers to the following apparatus setup shown below, and we're looking at a potato that is gorged, and of course it has distilled water in it, and there's distilled water in the petri dish. And of course we're looking here what can be done to cause the level of a solution in the petri dish to rise after 20 minutes. This is easy. Now we're looking at osmosis. So if we were supposed to add some salt to the petri dish, then the concentration in the petri dish would have been higher. Now the water concentration in the potato, however, would be higher. So what is going to happen is that you're going to have more salt particles in the petri dish. So the water is going to move through the membrane of a potato into the petri dish, and that is of course going to cause the water level in the petri dish to rise. Alright, so the water in the petri dish will rise and that in the potato will decrease. So B is the most suitable answer here. 5 grams of salt to the distilled water in the petri dish only. B being the most suitable answer. Here we move on down. Mature plant cell is different from a mature animal cell because the mature plant cell has a large permanent vacuole. They will both have mitochondria, both have cell membrane, and of course they'll definitely have a nucleus that is suspended in the cytoplasm, as we explained before. So C here is the most suitable answer. Large permanent vacuole. Animal cells will have smaller vacuoles, and in some cases these vacuoles are going to be more numerous. But of course, like we said before, the plant is going to have that large permanent vacuole. So C there is the answer. And we move on down to the other question. Which of the following graph shows the effect of temperature on an enzyme control reaction? Now, one thing about enzyme is that enzymes tend to work best at a particular temperature. Now, a temperature about 37 degrees Celsius, as it were, for us. And as the temperature increases to 37, the rate of activity would have increased. However, when we get to 37 and start going to 40, then the rate of reaction would fall. So we're looking at something that should somewhat resemble a bell curve. So A out, B out, and C is upside down, not the one we're looking at. So of course, D is the most suitable answer here. So D is the answer for this particular question. It was really easy for us, you think, based on the explanation given above. And we're moving on to question number 17, and this is of course the role of enzyme is best of course defined as a molecule, which now this is a repeated question in its same position from 2018, question number 17, and this is pretty much a good reason why we should read through all the options as answer. If you look at question at, of course, option A, you will realize that the increased rate of chemical reaction, that is of course plausible. B is O, but look at C, increased rate of chemical reaction but remain unchanged at the end of a reaction. That is of course the most suitable answer, or the best answer we would say. I'll move on to question number 18. Refers to the following longitudinal section through the tooth, one there being the enamel, two being the dentine, and three there being the pulp cavity, four there being the gum. Now, which region of the tooth contain large number of blood vessels and nerves? That is going to be, of course, C. 3 there being the pulp cavity. So the pulp cavity is that region there that is going to contain a large number of blood vessels. So C here being our answer for question number 18. We're moving on to question number 19. And this is of course a repeated question, and it is even on the 2015 specimen paper. Refers to the following diagram, which represents a metabolic process carried out in plant. So we have water, light, carbon dioxide entering, and we have oxygen leaving. And of course, in the cell, we have some chlorophyll, and of course, food coming. These are oxygen and food are, of course, product. Now, the question wants us to answer to the food produced is, of course, going to be glucose. One will recall that glucose, the formula there, when we look at photosynthesis, is C6H12O6. So glucose is, of course, the food there that is being produced. Now we move on down to the other question, and we're looking at autotrophic organisms. They derive their nutrient, of course, from, of course, simple inorganic substance only. Carbon dioxide is, of course, inorganic. Remember, we are looking now at organic versus inorganic, and I think this is pretty much a definition from the text. If you were supposed to go to our channel, you would have seen this nicely explained when we look at autotrophic, heterotrophic, and saprophytic nutrition. Let's look at this one. A 60-year-old male is advised by his doctor to pay special attention to the amount of salt in his diet. He probably has a high chance of developing hypertension. And of course, A there and B would also cause hypertension. But the answer here is C. There's a possibility that he's, of course, developing hypertension. Sickle cell is pretty much out. So the most plausible answer there is C, as we make our way to the other question, which of course look at the respiratory system, and we are at item 22. So 1 there being the trachea, 2 there being the ribs, and as we move down to 3 we are looking at the bronchioles, and we move down to 4 we're seeing the diaphragm. Now, which labeled part represents the rib? As we said, it's 2, as you're seeing on screen there. So B is going to be the answer for 22, and we just move on up now to show you again the diagram. That of course 2, B is of course the answer, B there being the rib cage, 2 there. And we make our way down to the other question 23, which refers to the following equation, which shows the oxidation of glucose in cells. And of course we're looking at the aerobic respiration with oxygen and the glucose. And of course I placed the 6 there just to balance the equation. Chemistry student would better understand that, and when you have this equation you want to ensure that it is balanced. Then energy, the energy released from the process above is A is out, B is converted to ATP, it's plausible, but let's go on down, stored in high energy bonds in ATP. This is the most suitable answer here, as one of the ATP will be broken off, that high energy bond, of course, to get you that energy that is needed. And of course, it will now change to ADP. Now, if you look at, of course, ATP as the currency of the cell, as the syllabus and the text would have put it, you would have seen this nicely explained. There's even a diagram in most textbooks that you could look at for 23 in your basal reader that is provided by your school or the ministry in your island. So, of course, D there being the answer. And we move on down to the other question. The other question, which of the following feature does not enhance a leaf's ability to absorb solar energy? Now, don't be confused with the idea of adaptation for photosynthesis. This is just for absorb solar energy. So, of course, our answer here is going to be B, the presence of vascular bundle, because it says not. Vascular bundle will, of course, enhance the process of photosynthesis, but we're talking about light absorption. So, of course, numerous chloroplasts will, of course, enhance the light. Also, C is true and D is true. So, the only false here is B. B there being your answer. Which of the following correctly matches the stored nutrient to their storage organ? Alright, so I started out and I pretty much looked at a number of stuff. I ruled out A and B. Glycogen is of course stored in the liver cell. The fruit is of course going to store glucose, fructose and sucrose, but the sucrose here being the most suitable, as the fats would have been out for the root, so carbohydrate is in. So D is of course the most plausible answer here for 25, hence we circle D. Now, you have to ensure that you look at this in your text as you look at storage organ. We'll move to 26. Which of the following correctly matches the gaseous exchange structure to organism? Now, this is a repeated question, however, the position of the responses are somewhat different. So, A there being our answer, the alveoli is always going to be correct for a human, and there we have the fish. We have fish filament, or lamellae, one would say, and then the plant leaves, of course, must be large. So A there being the answer. The others are out. We really don't need to look at that. The gill rack and the gill bar, that would have thrown out everything. The mouth would have also helped to throw it out. So I think this exam paper was a little friendly by CXC to our students. Should I say thanks, CXC? You tell me in the comment whether they deserve to hear thanks for this particular paper for the persons who sat this paper in 2020. Those who are sitting in 2021, I do hope that it will be a little more favorable for you. All right, we're looking at question 27. The essential vitamins and mineral iron required for blood clotting in human are is going to be, of course, vitamin K, and the mineral here is going to be calcium iron. Now, D is selected as the answer for 27, and you want to ensure that you know the difference between your vitamin and, of course, your minerals. Let's look at 28. Which of the following best identifies some of the transport substance in animals? This is not so difficult, as we're looking at amino acid, which is pretty much the smallest part of protein, and of course we're looking at hormones, which are of course chemical messengers which are transported in the blood. Sucrose is not transported, it is actually glucose that is transported. So our answer here is of course 1 and 2. A is going to be our response for 28. So you want to ensure that you're following as we go through, and remember to use your text as we go through. So we're looking at an amoeba, and it obtains all the oxygen it needs by diffusion via its cell membrane, while a human need to have a special respiratory surface for this purpose. The best reason for this difference is that, okay, this question is like one of the questions that one would know. It comes pretty much from circulation, and it looks at surface area to volume ratio. So if you looked at circulation, or you haven't looked at it just yet, you could go onto my channel and look at surface area to volume ratio, and this is well explained there in animation. So our answer here is going to be D, but ensure that you read through all the options here. A is out, of course, B is out, C is out. But the answer D here, a human surface area to volume ratio, is too small for diffusion to be effective. I will look at item 30 in the transport of solutes in the phloem. The source is defined as any area of a plant where, and we chose C for the answer here. This was really nice. Now we didn't have to look at A and B because the phloem doesn't transport water. It is transporting, of course, the sugary stuff, what is manufactured by during photosynthesis. So here we chose sucrose, and sucrose is loaded into the phloem. That is of course going to be the source at C, and D is going to be the sink. So C there are answer for 30. And the source and sink concept is nicer used when we look at the carbon cycle. So we look at the carbon source and carbon sink, something there for you to ensure that you remember as well. Now we are looking at the following diagram of a potato plant, 1 there being the leaf, 2 there being the stem, and of course 3 there being the tuber, and 4 there being the root. Now what is required of us is which part of a plant contains most starch, and that of course is going to be the tuber there, 3. So C is our answer here, and it nicely matches with a table we answered further up on this paper when we looked at the organ versus what is stored. So C there being the answer. 32 refers to the following diagram of a mammalian kidney nephron, and 1 there being the Bowman's capsule with of course a glomerulus in, which is responsible for of course ultrafiltration, and 2 there being the proximal convoluted tubule, or the first convoluted tubule where selective reabsorption takes place, and 3 there being the loop of Henle, which is responsible for some amount of water in the kidney. Now which of the following correctly identifies a function of each? Now B here is going to be our answer: ultrafiltration, selective reabsorption, and of course water conservation. So B is our answer for this particular question. It wasn't so much of a difficult thing, as you will see on the diagram I explained there, and we wanted to find which one matches the function and the name. Now locomotion is important to animals for to pretty much avoiding predators, and of course for reproduction, finding mate. But as it were for assimilation, that is not important. Assimilation is how the body uses this food when it is absorbed. So of course our choice here is going to be A for 33. So 1 and 2 we selected and omitted assimilation. Of course, this is a very nice question, and like I continue to say, remember to know the difference between movement and locomotion. The correct order for effective nervous response. So let us look. The receptor can't be at the end, so A is out. B, the effector is at the end, but it doesn't start with a spinal cord. C, the receptor can't be at the end, so D is a more suitable answer, where the receptor is going to pick up that stimulus, the change in the environment, send it to the spinal cord, which is later be registered in the brain. However, the effectors, which are muscles and glands, they are going to bring about that change to, of course, protect the organism. 35. The best description for the role of excretion in living organism is to not produce urine, not to produce feces. Feces is not an excretory product, it's an digested product. So C is our answer for 35. Get rid of toxic waste. You could look at, of course, D, but remember that it says best. So C is going to be the best answer there for 35. 36 refers to the following diagram illustrating the steps involved in an experiment. Pretty much an experiment, and you are seeing there the light source and a transparent cap on one of the plant, one there being untouched, the other with the tip there being removed. However, the light source is there, and another with foil on top of it, which creates a dark environment for this particular plant. So we're looking at what the question wants us to look at now and to see how best we can answer this. You want to ensure that you look at these questions that has to do with tropism, this question that has to do with photosynthesis, the questions that have to do with photosynthesis, and those that have to do with, of course, tropism. So here we're looking after a few days, the tallest shoot would most likely be 1. As of course, we're going right back to photosynthesis, and we're going to look at the concept of etiolation, where the cells become elongated as a plant is pretty much in a dark area, and it is like a piece of zinc thrown down on the grass or something covering the plant there. What you're going to find is that the plants are going to become slender and start to put on this fast growth to see how quickly it can get to the sun so that it can secure for itself some, of course, light energy to make food. So A, there be no answer for 36. Very easy. The concept of etiolation was applied. Now, item 37 refers to the following diagram of a reflex arc. And of course, we want to identify the parts of this reflex arc. We're seeing the cell body there in the middle at D. So that tells us that it's a sensory neuron at D. And at B, we're seeing there the very short neuron that is, of course, called the relays, also called the intermediate or the connector neuron. A whole lot of name that it has there. And I just erase it there, and we're moving on over here to C. And we have C, which is of course connected to the muscle. That's what that makes the motor neuron. And then A here is of course the receptor. So that is picking up that information and sending it into CNS to, of course, effect a response. And of course, C is going to be our most suitable answer here. It attaches itself nicely to the muscle. So C there is our answer. Which live structure relay the impulse to the effector? That's going to be the motor neuron, as we said. 38 refers to the following diagram, which show movement in plants and animal, a bird and a vine. So once we're seeing plants and animal and the concept movement or locomotion comes up, we are looking at making the distinction between, of course, movement and locomotion. It might not be explicitly stated, but it is a concept that I tend to understand once I'm seeing these two words and the plant. So plants tend to move while animals tend to both move and locomote. Which of the following statement about movement in bird and movement in a vine is true? So A is a pretty interesting answer. We omitted B and we also omitted C, right? If we look here, the bird The bird and the vine move because of a stimulus. The bird is not moving because of any stimulus. The bird decided, of course, to move. The bird moves its entire body while the plant does not move. The plant moves, of course, the plant grows, and of course, D is going to be the ideal answer, the most suitable answer here for 38. The entire body of the bird, of course, moves while a part of the plant moves. So, of course, like I said, a nice comparison there of pretty much locomotion versus movement. So D being our answer for 38, and we will always remember that plants tend to move, not locomote, because they are not displaced from where they are planted. However, the animal, they will move from one place to another to find food, mate, and all these fancy stuff. So 39, which of following best describe the term stimulus and response? This is going to be a nice question. A stimulus is, of course, a notable change in the environment, and of course, a response is that which is brought about as a result of a stimulus. So our answer here was, of course, D, a detectable change in an organism environment, and response, an organism reaction to that particular change or to the stimulus in the environment. So this is something that you want to know once you're doing biology. It pretty much remains the same. So we move on to the other question. Which of the following factor does not contribute to glaucoma in the eye? So of course, heredity would contribute because of course you're getting it from your parents or your foreparents. Stroke will cause a damage in the brain, and if there's a damage, that could probably lead to glaucoma. And of course, age. I will talk about age. We're talking about a degenerative disease, so that could cause it as well. Now, the knot here selects A to be the knot vitamin A, which is of course for night blindness. Pretty much this, which is a real thing, they could really trick you here. But our answer here is going to be A. I really don't see all this is associated here. So vitamin A deficiency is not definitely going. It's definitely not going to cause glaucoma, as far as I know. Now, so we move on down to the function of the choroid layer in the eye is to pretty much provide nutrient one, and of course prevent internal reflection. And that is pretty much textbook. If you were supposed to look at the diagram of the eye and of course look at what's the function of the choroid, you'd find it right there. So B there being the answer. And we move to our other question as we try to manipulate, find our way around this page, as we said that it wasn't as easy as we wanted it to be. The following statement describe the process taking place within a seed during germination. And there we have it, the embryo is used to develop the radicle, which is the root, and the plumule, which is the shoot. And of course, the enzyme is going to, of course, break down protein into enzymes and amino acid. Now, the soluble product moves into the embryo. So here we're going to have it 2, 3, 1, that type of a thing. So not a, it's a which of the following correctly identify the sequence of event during the germination of seed. So it's not A, it's not B, it's not C. It's going to be D, 2, 3, 1. Right? And we see it there as the options were given. We were able to look at that. So we'll move on to the other question. And of course, it refers to the following diagram, which illustrates the measurement of growth in living, I think it says living organism, and I label the y-axis and the x-axis, and this is pretty much a sigmoid growth curve or a S-curve, and it's pretty much used a lot in academics. Now, which of the following labels would be incorrect on the y-axis? So for that reason, I labeled the axis that we can, of course, recall or remember. Here we have the x-axis, and over here we have the y-axis. On the x-axis, we would have the independent variable, and on the y-axis, we would have the dependent variable. You might need to do some more reading on that. So here, C is going to be the answer, unit of time. That would have been incorrect if we had time on the y-axis. So now you realize that it's very important that you understand graphs and you're able to put that information in accurately. So you want to master your measurement and manipulation, and of course analysis of data. Item 44 refers to, of course, the diagrams that we're seeing on screen. Now, which of the following structure is common in both cells? Now, cilia, no, I don't know about that. The nucleus is common in both cells, and you'll see it as we look at the egg cell, and of course, we look at the sperm cell. I think that's the egg cell, and the nucleus there, and the nucleus over here on the sperm cell. The flagellum is also on the sperm cell, but not on the other cell. And the acrosome, that is, of course, synonymous with the sperm cell. We know that it's very important during fertilization. Which of the following, which row in the following table correctly states the cause, treatment, control, and prevention of the disease AIDS? Now, causative agent, it is a RNA virus, not a bacteria. Treatment, it is a antiretroviral, and there we have an example of the antiretroviral. And then control, monogamy, one person, one partner, and of course abstinence could of course prevent it. So A here being our answer. The others are pretty much out, but you could look at them. They are really out by a mile, so we really don't need to dive into them. All right, not a bacteria, not a DNA, but of course RNA virus. Which of the following forms of birth control is likely to be most effective? No, the condom tend to burst sometimes, the diaphragm shifts sometimes, and sometimes it's not properly put in. So severing that tube through tubal ligation is of course going to be the best answer. C being the best answer here. Birth contraceptive pill, persons miss them at time and they say that they don't work, that type of thing. Persons have their different experiences. So C there the answer. The other question here, which of the following is the correct sequence for seed formation after fertilization? So A is our answer here, the ovule, the zygote, the embryo, and then the seed. The ovule, the zygote, the embryo, and the seed. I remember this is one case in which Z comes first. It's usually at the end of the alphabet, but I think Z likes reproduction as it gets an opportunity to be first. Okay, so a vector is defined as an organism that bites, probably cause a disease, who knows. C, lives on another organism, that could be a parasite or some other relationship. And D, transmit disease carrying organism. These are nice answer here. We could look at the mosquito and we could look at ticks and that type of a thing. They are examples of course, vectors. So D there being our answer. We move to the other question, which is of course 49, and of course going. Production of new organism with of course only one parent, we're assuming, is known as asexual reproduction. We do hope that that is what the question is asking. Asexual reproduction will only require one parent, sexual will require two parents. Mitosis is really integral in the process of asexual reproduction, like meiosis is integral in, of course, sexual reproduction. More can be said about this, but our answer here is going to be A for 49. And we make our way pretty much down to 51 example of sex-linked disease. Cancer is going to be out, hypertension is going to be out, and of course C is going to be the most appropriate answer here, color blindness. And Down syndrome is pretty much an addition of a chromosome, so you really don't want that, for not 46 but 47 as it were the case for human. So item 50, your answer here is going to be C. We make our way to the other question. And it refers to the diagram which shows the stages of mitosis. And I usually use a memory aid for my kids. I show them I, which is interphase at the top, PMAT, which is actually mitosis, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. And then just below we have cytokinesis. So of course I like my kids to remember these, and of course we match them to what is happening in the, of course, diagram, whatever diagram that we're getting. But of course, there you want to, if you have not been exposed to this formula, say that Mr. Wilson gave you on CSEC Biology the cover page. So here we would go with, of course, 3 being the first stage, as it were here, and of course 2 metaphase, where the chromatids are lined up on the, of course, the what we call the spindle fiber, one might say on the equator. And then we're having in one day the chromatids are moving to separate ends. And then We move on down to 4 here, where we're having cleavage taking place, cytokinesis taking place down there. So of course we think that the answer there is going to be 3, 2, 1, 4. I think that's going to be 3, 2, 1, 4. Alright, so that's the answer we have there. And of course, we're going to be doing something on mitosis very soon. You want to look at how we navigate ourselves around and the memory aids that we're using with our students. Now, on a certain Caribbean island where sugarcane is grown, a fungus is accidentally introduced into the island and destroy the entire crop of sugarcane. Which of the following best describes this occurrence? Well, once we're going to see this, we start thinking about sugarcane is propagated asexually, right? And asexual, well, now we're going to look at a disadvantage of asexual reproduction. And one disadvantage is the lack of variation. So A is out, B is out. You could read them. C is, of course, out. D is going to be our answer. There was no genetic variation among the plants, so none could survive the attack. Remember at all times that sugarcane is asexually propagated, and a disadvantage is that it lacks variation, so it becomes susceptible to disease should there be an outbreak of any particular disease. This is a good example of a disadvantage of asexual reproduction. Which of the following is not a characteristic of meiosis? Maintenance of a diploid number. We could just stop here. A, not, as meiosis is responsible for the haploid number, that is half the number of chromosomes as with the sex cells. So of course A here is going to be our answer and not the others. We move on down to the other question, 54. And of course 54, albinism is caused by a recessive allele. Two normal parent produce an albino child. This is because they were both heterozygous for the trait. One might say that they are carrier. They were both heterozygous. So we're using capital A and common A here as our alleles. And A. So that is pretty much the heterozygous. And when we look at pretty much A and A there, we get a homozygous. And of course, A and A there, heterozygous. But then look at the circle portion here. I worked it out earlier. You would have gotten O and of course O, and that is, sorry, A and of course A, common A. So that's the albino child, or answer there being B. Alright, so 55. Variation in a population is due to mutation. In some places, rural area, they say it's obia, and of course, crossing over. Asexual reproduction does not lead to variation, as we saw in the question to our left. So answer here being A, 1 and 2, asexual reproduction being omitted. 56. Two goats heterozygous for fast growth rate are crossed. What percentage of the entire F1 population would be expected to possess the homozygous allele? So we're looking at they must have the same allele. So I did this here. They are both heterozygous. I'm using F for the fast growth. So the capital F, common F, capital F. So the first here we have two capitals. So that is going to be one of the answers we're looking for. Homozygous, pretty much homozygous F there, and then another we circle here, recessive. So one is dominant, one is of course recessive. So it is half of the 4 that is looked at here. So of course your answer is going to be C, 50%. Wow, this is another 157. I'm going a man with blood group A married to a woman with blood group B. They both they were able to produce 2 children with blood group AB. The allele AB is described as being codominant, and this is of course textbook. I love to say that these they pretty much live loving. So these alleles are pretty much loving. They are codominant. They will just be there and they won't fight. They'll just exist together like nice wife and husband, a nice family setting. So they're pretty much codominant there. I will make our way down to, of course, 58. And which of the following is true about natural selection and of course artificial selection? This is a repeated question from 2018. However, a word or two might have been changed, but pretty much the same thing. So C is our answer here. produce organisms well suited to the environment, and of course produce very different organisms from the natural population. So C, there be no answer. Now, a group of closely related organisms that are able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring are called species. Species refer to organisms that are able to interbreed and produce viable offspring. We would have seen the Rattus, and that is the genus and species name, and the Rattus narventicus. So the Rattus and the narventicus, they are two rats there, but they won't interbreed because and produce viable offspring because they are not of the same species. Which of the following term refers to a visible characteristic in living things? That's always going to be your phenotype. Genotype are the letters that we're using earlier on. So if you can see it, 5 fingers, dark, tall, blue eyes, that type of thing, that's phenotype. C, there is the answer. And we have come to the end of our overview of the Biology 2020 multiple choice paper from CSEC. We do hope that you liked what we did, and if you did, please be reminded to like, share, and of course subscribe. And when you subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you will be informed as soon as there is a new selection. You need to select all when you hit that notification bell, and be reminded of our live classes on YouTube on a Wednesday, on a Friday, and Sunday at 5:05 p.m. and we're streaming from Kingston, Jamaica. Of course, remember to invite a friend and come on over. Until next time, take care.